This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations.
We want families to come here and gain insightful strategies that empower them to successfully teach diverse learners at home.
Hosted by founder and CEO of SPED Homeschool, Peggy Ployer.
Our goal is that these powerful weekly conversations will boost your confidence to cultivate the best at-home learning environment for your student.
For more homeschool resources, go to spedhomeschool.com. You're listening to Empowering Homeschool Conversations with Peggy Ployer.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations. Today, we are going to talk about science at home, a homeschool parent's guide to integrating STEM into everyday life. And my guest today is, I'm going to pull this up. My guest today is Tina Salmanowitz. I'm going to say that correctly. Tina is a passionate educator and mother who holds a bachelor's of art in early education and a master's in education and curriculum instruction with a focus on science education. She started her career in education in 2007, teaching life science in middle school students. And in 2020, she decided to resign from that and homeschool, which led to her discovery of the benefits of outdoor learning when she enrolled her oldest in a forest school and eventually was teaching a preschool program there. That then led to her being inspired to start her own program called Little Monsters Universe. Welcome, Tina, to the show. I'm excited to have you here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
Yeah. When Tina and I were talking ahead of the show, and then we had a previous conversation just about integrating science into life. And I'm just so excited about this topic. I sent out an email to our community saying, want to throw away one of those curriculum books? And I think, we hold so tight sometimes to that old way of doing education. And so I'm excited about this conversation and everything, your ideas that you have to share with us, and just the impact difference of approaching science from this direction. So was science always something that you have loved from early on, or no?
No. So that's part of like the journey that, got me to where I am. I did not always love science. In fact, I wasn't always good at it either. A lot of times it was very boring. It was just dry. I was reading a textbook, and it wasn't really exciting for me.
Right.
And I had two teachers in particular that I'll never forget, because they introduced me to this other way of science where it was very hands-on and took us out of that textbook.
Right.
And we would go into the field. We would observe trees. We had like a tree that we had to like watch and, make notes about throughout the seasons, and saw how it changed. We got to draw and write about it.
Right.
And then a biology teacher that had hands-on dissections. And that really is what sparked a lot of my curiosity. Because prior to that, it really wasn't interesting to me.
Right. Yeah. Well, science in a book science isn't meant to be in a book.
Yes.
It's everywhere and all around us. And so, yeah, excited to kind of dive into that. And, coming from a person who didn't like it in that way makes it even more exciting, because I think a lot of our kids and parents, if you're watching and comment, feel free to comment wherever you're watching from. But if you've got those kids that they don't like it when you're doing the workbook pages, they check out. And science can be so fun, and you'd rather they experience it like you did early on and catch that versus realizing later in life, this is actually a great thing, and wish I would have discovered it earlier. So let's talk about a mind shift change first for people who have been teaching it that way or were raised to have science in a textbook or in a classroom, an approach from maybe more of a theoretical approach versus this hands-on discovery approach. What needs to change in their thinking?
So like thinking that like science is just a subject and we need a textbook to read about it, and we're just giving kids that content, that needs to shift to like science is a way of thinking. And we want kids to think like a scientist. We want
Yes.
them making observations. We want them asking questions, essentially making sense of the world around them. And when we're able to change that mindset, it then becomes easier to incorporate science into our daily lives.
Yeah.
Then we're viewing these problem-solving moments, these everyday interactions that we have, we're viewing them as opportunities to get our kids, like scientists, to engage in these scientific processes that really fosters this lifelong journey of learning. And then the content becomes secondary.
Right. Yes. But at the same time, the content does stick better.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, they're doing it, they're being involved, and it really does help that content to stick. So when you have that focus that we're focusing on thinking like a scientist first, the content will just naturally come with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And what about failure? I would love to hear your response on this, because science is a lot about failure. So how do we approach that, to especially, a lot of kids within our community are very perfectionistic. A lot of kids on the spectrum tend to be. How can science help with that mind shift, that failure is not a bad thing?
Failure is necessary, especially in the world of science, to help you to learn from that. And those failures are helping you to figure out like what went wrong and what can we do to, change that, to get to the results that we want. So I kind of find failure, especially in science, to kind of be important. Like it's important to, fail at things to better our understanding.
Yeah. And that's it's so different than the typical mindset, of kids. They just want to get it perfect and do it right and do
Yes.
like the best thing possible, and then they fail at it and then they give up.
Yeah.
But
So
yeah.
my oldest, she struggles with that a lot. And I found like incorporating art into science has been really helpful for us personally. Because it's like there's no right or wrong here. It's your art, your vision, and letting her just experiment and really just being creative with a lot of stuff. And I felt like that really has helped her overcome some of that, because she is also like that perfectionist that like, I need to get it right. Like she's like afraid to even answer a question if she's going to get it wrong. No matter how much I say, like, it doesn't matter. Like failure or like getting it wrong, making mistakes is how we learn. Like that's how we learn. And then showing her too, I think it's important also to show kids that like we make mistakes as well. And it's okay. We're learning from our own mistakes. And those two things I think has helped, at least with my oldest.
Yeah, and you bring up something that's really important too, is that science is more of an art than it is a right and wrong type of thing. And we forget that because we look at hypotheses and experiments from long ago that people figured out, or through dissections and lots of things. But there's so much even now that medical people, scientists are discovering, and they're realizing they were wrong.
Yes.
And so we may even teach out a textbook, and what you're teaching out of a textbook might be wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so think about that for a second, and think about then contrasting it with discovery. And is it so different that you're not using a curriculum that was written out word for word for you, and that you might mess up your child by not teaching it by the book?
Yeah. No, absolutely.
So, yeah, it's a lot of food for thought, and making that shift. Have you found, as far as like parents that come to you with their kids, have they already made this mind shift, or is there anything that you have found to be helpful to them if they do struggle with, well, what else do we have to do in addition to, this hands-on discovery stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, I think a lot of parents have that mentality of like, what do we need to cover versus like, that's like the whole point of the the mindset shift, because it's all about like, what content do I need to cover? What do they need to know? Versus like them focusing on those science and engineering practices.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing that, we work on.
That's
So,
awesome. Yeah.
yeah.
And it's the practices that will lead to our children's own discoveries.
Yes.
So what kinds of practices do you move towards versus just opening a book and, in general overall thinking?
So, and then I'll share a few examples as well. But overall, like the whole thinking like a scientist that I talk about is that like problem solving, thinking critically, trying to figure things out on their own. So I'll give some examples, especially things that we've done in our home that we do like in everyday life. So one of our favorite things to do, like I'm not huge in the kitchen. I don't love to cook, but I know some families do. And cooking and being in the kitchen is a great place to incorporate a lot of science. We personally make our own maple syrup. So that's something, I love it. And I love doing that with my kids. I'm not, a major chef or anything, but I do enjoy the whole process of making the maple syrup. And it really gets them to like think critically with us and learn and ask questions along the way. Right. So we start off like in the fall, but we identify the trees and they look for patterns to identify like, what does the leaf look like? The shapes, the patterns, the bark. Right. We identify that tree. Then we tap it and we talk about the different temperatures, and they're outside, they're with us, like they're feeling like the temperature changes and seeing how the sap will start to flow as it warms up during the day. And something too that we've learned over the years, and they're doing it with us and they're learning right alongside it with us, is like what trees are the best to tap and what side of the tree based on where the sun is facing.
Wow.
So like, there's a lot of learning involved, and some of it we're learning right alongside of them. And then down to like getting into the kitchen. And this is where, a lot of other things that you're doing, even when you're boiling pasta, when we're boiling down the sap, we're talking about the evaporation, and they're seeing the water level get lower. So they're visually seeing things, they're making their own observations. They might have questions along the way. And it's a great learning experience for them. And it could be like, even in the kitchen too, it could be as simple as like melting butter. They're seeing those states of matter change from a solid to a liquid using heat. So there's just a lot of learning that can be done in the kitchen. There's learning that can be done in gardening. We do a lot of gardening ourselves. With like the vegetables and the fruits. I personally like the idea of letting the kids like be responsible for their own plant. If they're super young, they'll have them do it alongside of you, but as they get a little older, give them that responsibility and let them take care of their own plant. And by doing that, they're put in charge. They have this, feeling about like themselves, like they get more invested in the learning, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And then they're doing those skills, those processes that we talk about, where they're making the observations, they're seeing what's happening. If something's not going right, they're going to form hypotheses like, what's going on here? Why do I think this is happening? Maybe it needs more water. Maybe it needs more sunlight. And they're going to experiment and they're going to investigate. And like we said before, like they might fail, but that's okay, because they're learning like, okay, well, I did this and it didn't work. So now I know what not to do. And so I'm going to change that for next time.
Yeah. And
So
those types of lessons, they stick.
yes,
They're not ones you forget. When you
yes,
fail, it's like, oh, check mark. Let's not do that again.
yes. But then when they are successful, they are
Yes.
so happy about it.
Yeah.
And like they
Hmm.
feel this sense of accomplishment, and it means so much more at that point.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, it goes both ways, definitely.
yes.
Can you talk a little bit? You talked about parents learning alongside their kids. I think that's intimidating to many parents to not have all the right answers and to not know it, what they're always doing. Um, how can a parent who feels intimidated about that really start letting go of not having to know everything in order to teach really what they need to teach?
Yeah, so I think understanding too that like you don't need to have all the answers. It's understanding that it's actually helpful for your children because
Mm,
you're modeling for them. Like if you don't know
yeah.
something, you're modeling for them what to do. And you're
Mhm.
also modeling that like that whole like that concept of failure that we were talking about. You're modeling that like, hey, I don't know this and it's okay not to know everything. And
Right.
that's like a really good thing to model for your kids.
Mm.
And then like as you're going through that process, especially for younger kids or kids that are struggling to kind of voice everything, modeling for them, thinking out loud helps because you can think out loud like, hey, there's a problem here. I don't know the answer to this. Let's figure this out. Or help me. Let's figure this out together.
Mhm.
And then again, verbalizing the whole process really
Right.
helps to model for those kids who do struggle with that.
Yeah, I wanna really touch on that verbalizing and that dialogue that you were talking about. I know in previous conversations, we've brought that up even with, like, speech and language therapists and how much parents don't talk as much as they should just to
Yes.
even model, good, sentence structure and composition. We forget that our speech. We just kinda keep it inside, that dialogue, and how important it is to be talking what we're
Yes.
thinking, because our kids need to know that. They need to go through that process with us and realize it's something that we're doing as we're cooking, as we're, doing all these things around the house, so that they understand we just don't get it. There's things going on up here.
Yes,
And it's like,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah. I hear my son going, "And I should," and then I hear myself doing the same thing, and I'm going, "Oh, he caught it from me."
Yes.
Uh, so other than, so you talked a little bit about kitchen and gardening. Um, what are some ways specifically that, like those are activities and other activities, if we can dive into those and others, that parents can start making that shift to incorporate discussions about what's going on that is scientifically related, that kids could pick up on and learn from?
So, like, what other examples, like around the house and things
Yeah,
like that? Yeah.
exactly. Yes.
Um, so, home repairs, like even little
Hmm.
fixes, that would be a really great area. You could be talking about like basics of like forces, like simple pushes and pulls, simple machines, whether you're using like the
Hmm.
screwdriver and you're talking about the screw. If like fixing a bicycle, if your kid loves to ride a bicycle and you have them helping
Yeah.
to fix the
Right.
bicycle, you're talking about those gears.
Hmm.
And those are all things that you can talk about out loud with your children. Um, and getting them to like think critically and problem solve with you.
Mhm.
The outdoor learning, like I am very, very big on the outdoor learning and I could talk for hours about it. But just going outside with your kids is a
Yes.
great way to incorporate those conversations and to look for things.
Hmm.
And there are so many different cross-cutting concepts in science that you can observe just by being outdoors.
Huh.
Um, so
Yeah.
do you mind if I
Yeah,
go into those
kinda
a little?
d di
Okay.
yeah, dive into them a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. Because I can talk forever. So you stop me.
No, 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 you're
Okay.
doing good. This is great content because I think
Yes.
sometimes we lose ourselves at, "Well, what do I do now?" And I think getting into the everyday, "Oh, I'm in this space. Yes, there's science here too."
Yes.
We forget that because we're just get so caught up.
Yes, yeah. So like the kitchen, the gardening, the home repairs, outdoors. I love it. Outdoors is free. You don't need to, pay to be
Right?
outside.
Yeah.
So you can explore your own backyard. You could watch from out the window, if it's too cold, like right now it's freezing by us.
Yeah.
Nature hikes. I personally suggest keeping like a nature journal so you can like document stuff, draw as you go. And it helps them to like maybe focus a little bit more versus just getting out and running around and, and giving them even like challenges. Like I give my kids challenges. Like when we go on nature hikes, I might give them a challenge. Like we're going to look for, all the colors of the rainbow today and see how many colors they can find. And it helps them to really focus and practice those observation skills. And then you'll be surprised too at how many questions arise during that, like even just simple, like, what is this? But there's a lot of questions that come up. So the cross-cutting concepts that you could be learning when you're outside are things like, observing patterns. And maybe these are part of those challenges that you give to your kid. Like, how many patterns can we find today? You can find like the little swirl patterns in seashells or seasonal patterns, like with the changing of the leaves, looking for as many different color leaves as you can find. They're cause and effect relationships.
Oh, yeah.
So when you're outside, you might be looking, focusing on the weather and how does the weather affect some of the animals or the things that live in that area. Are there birds flying to warmer areas? Is it getting too cold? Or do you see birds coming in, depending on where you live?
Right.
You're learning about systems. Like we live in a forest area. So that's our ecosystem that we're learning about. So we can learn about the different plants and animals and how they're interconnected. How do they react to one another?
Right.
And what they're doing. And a lot of times, like, that's also where the questions arise too. Like we saw this bird sitting with its wings out, just very, very still. And my kids were wondering, what's that bird doing? Why is it there? And instead of telling them, although I could very easily be like, well, this is what it's doing.
Right.
I started questioning with them to like encourage their questioning. Cause I think questioning is
so
super important.
Yeah.
So I started questioning. I don't know why it is. Let's see where it's like, where is it sitting? Is it sitting in the sun? Is it sitting in the shade? And then we make more observations and we try to come up with a theory, an idea of like, why is this bird sitting there?
Right.
And then maybe like, let's see the other birds. Are they also sitting in the sun? Maybe it is trying to keep warm. Things like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Those questions are so important because, I think, a couple interviews ago, someone had said, why do we answer their questions right away? Instead of saying, well, what do you think? And we're, leading them to the right answer instead of just giving them the right answer. We live in a place where they could look up the answer instantly, but we've lost the ability to really question why things happen when we have too many answers.
And I think that's part of it too. Like you're talking about the way our society is where, we can we have Google at our fingertips. So it's so easy and we're used to that like instant gratification and getting that. And in addition, we live in a very rushed society essentially. Right. So we always feel like, I know I do it. I definitely have moments where I am guilty of this, where I just feel rushed and I just want to give them an answer and move on because I've got, X, Y, and Z to do. Right. So that is also hard to pull back and be like, let's slow down. Like, let's, like let their questions happen. Let's guide and ask questions with them. And that's a struggle. I have struggled with that myself.
Yeah, so. I think it is a constant just in this day and age. And instead of allowing them to kind of dig in and figure out, that making that shift, having those conversations, speaking science into life. I remember when you talked about something, it brought up just a vivid memory. My dad's an engineer, and I was like an electrical engineer, and then I became a physicist. But he always said to me, I have more mass, you have less acceleration. And, when talking about force, because force is mass times acceleration, I'm like, oh, that means I have to push really hard to get the same force as my dad, and
Yes.
because if we'd be playing tug of war, I would never win because I was too little. Um, but those things get set into you when you bring just those concepts into everyday life, because they become part of your framework
Yes.
instead of just being, oh, we closed that book, now that's done, let's move on to whatever is next and actually real. um
Yes.
and so, yeah, that's so important. So what about family? We talked about individual, but what about like as a group?
So
Yeah.
yeah, so there's a lot of things you can do as a family, and we as a family like to get out in nature, and we do field trips to all different types of places.
Hmm.
One thing that we personally love doing, and I know this may not be the case for everybody, but we do love visiting different national parks. And the
Yes, we
national
do too.
parks have these great junior ranger programs.
Yeah.
I
You
have
can
a
do them as adults too.
yes,
You
yeah,
don't have to be a kid.
yeah, I partake in them with my kids, but I love it just as much as they do. And then they get
Hmm.
these cute
The
little
badges.
badges
Yes, we have a
that
whole
they
bunch of those.
earn. But they get like my kids get so into it and they get so involved and they're filling out their little notebooks. And we've done like the
Hmm.
junior ranger led programs and hikes. And it's
Yeah.
a lot of fun to do as a family. And so that's enjoyable. And just other places too, science museums, botanical
Hmm.
gardens, farms, aquariums, zoos.
Oh
There's so,
yeah.
so many places to
Hmm.
go. We in this, well, it was when it was warmer. We did like a geological site and we did mining and they got to see the rocks. My kids are obsessed with rocks. I mean,
Oh.
most kids are. So they loved like digging for stuff like that. And then we have a site near us too. I guess it depends on where you live, but we have a site
Right.
where you can actually go and look for fossils. And we,
Oh,
you know,
cool.
looked through the stream and found a bunch of fossilized shark teeth, and it was a real
Neat.
fun learning experience.
Absolutely.
So it's definitely worth it to look at, like, go online, look at what's in your area, see what you can explore together as a family.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, so I would highly recommend that.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
would say, based on your family's interest too. Yeah, we love camping, and so
yes.
the national parks have been one of our favorite places to take our kids when they were young. But, sometimes we just go to a campground and I have like a set of just some digging things. And usually campgrounds, you can just, yeah, as long as you clean everything up, it's always kind of just a little dirty anyways. And I would just let them go, let them get as dirty as they wanted to get during the day, and then just wash them at night before they went to bed.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have like some very basic things that we like let them use for exploring, like little nets,
Oh
um,
yeah, yeah.
and the magnifying glasses, like you
Hmm.
said, the little shovel. They love to dig and see what's in the
Yes.
dirt,
Uh-huh.
and just letting them explore. And that's how
Right.
those like questions come up. And we,
Hmm.
I know some people do like what they call like a wonder wall, and they have like a big
Oh.
bulletin, and that's where they'll put their questions.
Hmm.
We don't have like a big bulletin or anything, but we just keep like a little journal, a little notebook.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that way, when they do have those questions, when they do arise, if we can't experiment and explore right then and there, we write
Oh,
them
that's a great
down for like
idea.
a later time.
Later.
That's,
Yeah.
yeah, like when
Hmm.
we were talking about before with the questioning,
Hmm.
where sometimes we just don't have the time and we just want to move on and don't let them, like,
Right.
I don't want them to ever really feel like, stop asking questions. I want that to be something that they, carry throughout life.
Hmm.
So having that little notebook is something that's been beneficial for us too, because we write down the question. They feel like their questions are important and we can come back to
Right.
them later, which is really
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, because we don't always have time for those rabbit trails, and so, like, I love it. It's a delayed rabbit trail, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
We'll get to that eventually, but yes, for them to know that it's important, that
Yes.
their question matters, and there's an answer that we can seek together and find, and instead of, "Oh, we just gotta get this done, and, we have these other things to go." I remember those days, and, what a great idea. I love that. Definitely
Yeah.
wish I would have had it in my pocket. Um,
Yeah. And then
so Yeah.
Speaking
Nope.
of the family things you were
Mm-hmm.
asking me before
Yeah.
too,
Mm-hmm.
we also do something called family STEM nights.
Oh,
Um,
fun.
yeah, so we incorporate, we don't do it often, maybe like, recently we haven't done it because we've just been so overwhelmed with
Mm.
life.
Yeah,
But
that
we like
happens.
to, yeah, we like to do like maybe like once a month.
Mm-hmm.
And we have like a family STEM night where we have some sort of challenge.
Hmm.
And then my girls made like these little paper cup trophies. And if you win the challenge, you get to
Fun.
keep the trophy in your
Ah,
room, next to your bed or whatever for the
uh-huh.
month until the next challenge.
Very
So
cool.
which was really cute. So we've done some, like like, for example, we've built boats and we had to
Hmm.
see whose boat could hold the most. We have the little counting bears.
Oh, yeah.
So
Uh-huh.
we use those, but you can use pennies or whatever,
Oh,
but whose
yeah.
boat can
Yeah.
hold the most of whatever object.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, so we built the boats as like a family, everyone built their own.
Mm-hmm.
And then they got to explore and play with it during bath time. So like during bath time, they had their little boats
Ah,
and they would test it
yeah.
out to see which one floated. It
Hmm.
was really fun.
That's really
Um,
cool.
yeah. And another one we did, just for some examples, if people are considering
Yeah.
doing STEM family
Mm-hmm.
nights, we happened to be reading the story about the three little pigs with the big bad wolf.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we did house building, and they had to build a house
Ah,
that could withstand the wolf, the wind from the wolf's breath. And I actually brought it. I'm like a hands-on person.
yeah.
So I had a little wolf, and
Mm-hmm.
we cut the mouth out, and this is where my
Ah,
hair dryer went. So then
oh, okay.
so the hair dryer would go in here, and then the big bad wolf would come, and we would turn the hair dryer on, and we would see whose house was still standing. And they actually really got into that. We
Hmm.
built once, but my kids continued because they
Oh,
wanted to keep testing it
wow.
out. They were so involved. And when like even if like some of the house stood, but parts of it
Mm-hmm.
fell down, they were so motivated, like, let me try again. And they went and rebuilt it, redesigned it. And
Hmm.
then they wanted to bring the big bad wolf back out and
Yep.
test it again. They were so excited. And they did this about 3 or 4 times until they had like a
Wow.
solid structure where
Huh.
nothing blew off.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
So many good lessons to learn in that a book would never cover and they would never remember.
yes.
I just remember my son, building lots of Legos, and at first, in their mind, it's like, oh yes, I'm going to build this, and it's all going to stay together when I pick it up, and then like everything falls off, and I learned a very quick lesson when I asked, well, do you think maybe there's a better way to build that so it stays together? And then it was like the spark went off in him, and all of a sudden he just started, experimenting. But just asking that question, do you think there's a better way?
Yes.
And realizing just because it was in your mind and it seemed like it should be good doesn't mean that that's always going to work out. And now this child is an actual biomedical engineer. So that curiosity has carried him forward. But yes, and just I love that. I love that, that they continued on with creating, and I'm sure they came up with different trusses and structures that probably you wouldn't have even come up with.
Yeah. Yeah. No, they always surprise me with stuff like that. It's really fun to watch,
That's
when they
really
get so
cool.
into it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they have like, there's a lot of companies out there too that will have different STEM kits and things like
Yeah.
that you can
Mhm.
look up. So like if you don't, have a particular idea, there's so much that you can find online to come up with those like STEM night activities.
Yeah, yeah. You don't have to be super creative or be a
Yes.
scientist yourself. There's lots of help out there. That's
Yeah.
that's where all those internet resources come in handy.
Yeah. And I think the family nights as well are very exciting. Like I know my kids love it, especially because like daddy gets involved, and
Right.
it's usually mommy that's doing all the, teaching and hands-on stuff
Mhm.
with them. And he's out working during the day. And then so like when he comes
Right.
home in the evenings, and we have those times, like it's really special. And they really love
Absolutely.
when he gets involved.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. That's
yeah.
neat. Yep. And adds a different dimension when dad fails too, not just
Yes,
mom.
yes, yes. Yeah, so true.
That's great. So,
Yeah.
like, what about movies and literature to add into that mix?
Yeah, so I personally love like living science books. They are books that basically tell a story, but they're also
Mm-hmm.
getting those like science concepts across. Um, I wrote it down, the First Science Storybook series, a First Science Storybook series. That's one of my favorites, especially for younger kids. But it basically tells a story with those scientific concepts. Magic School Bus is a very popular one.
Oh, yeah.
Arbordale Publishing also has some incredible books. They're worth looking into. One of our favorites
Mm-hmm.
is Cactus Hotel.
Huh.
And yeah, it's a story all about this cactus and
Mm-hmm.
all the different animals that come to visit and basically live off of it, whether it's, it's providing them
Okay.
food or shelter or a
Mm.
home. And it's just showing like the interconnectedness
Right.
within a desert ecosystem, but it's
Hmm.
done in like the form of a story. And I
Neat.
feel like it makes things like more enjoyable, more
Mm-hmm.
relatable,
Right.
rather than, the typical textbooks.
Right. Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
then I brought another one too. I'm a big
Yeah.
fan of the Paper Pie, the Usborne Books and More
Oh,
stuff,
yes. Uh-huh.
because they do have that like, nonfiction stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not so like dry. And it's
Right.
done like, it just has like beautiful like images. They have like,
Mm-hmm.
especially for like the younger kid. I mean, even me as an adult, I
I
enjoy
know.
like the little like
Open the little
lift
doors and
yeah.
yes.
And it's all done with like bite-size pieces of
Yes.
information. So you're not
Mm-hmm.
getting so overwhelmed with stuff. And you don't obviously read the book all at once, but you do like
Right.
a page here and like a little flap
Mm-hmm.
there. And they're just
Right.
beautifully illustrated,
Yeah.
and smaller chunks of information to
Mm-hmm.
handle versus like a ton of information that you're not going to retain.
Right. Yeah. My kids always liked those books that had the little sidebar, like a little paragraph here and over here, on the pages that just gave it like a snack of information, and
Yes.
it was enough to kind of jumpstart something, or
Yes.
question or really? And then, you'd see them running out somewhere to discover, was that true? Or yeah, it just is enough, but not so overloading that they're like, okay,
Yes.
I'm done.
Yes. Yeah. Because it
Yeah.
becomes too much.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
yeah.
you
And
wanna
then,
spark that curiosity like you were talking about before.
yes. Yeah, absolutely. And then I have a whole blog article about different TV shows that are great for
Mhm.
science. But I know one that I really enjoy is the Wildcrats.
Oh, yeah.
The
Mhm.
Wildcrats is always good. And then my kids like the Cat in the Hat knows a lot about that. They
Hmm.
enjoy they enjoy him. But
Yeah.
yeah, I have a whole blog about like TV shows that are really great for science and for different ages.
Yeah. So I would love, for our show notes coming up, if you could share some of those book resources as
Oh,
well as that
absolutely.
blog link, and then our viewers and listeners can just click directly on those from the notes so that they
Sure.
can find all that information. I know as a parent, you just feel sometimes I'm just so overloaded. I got so much to do. Can somebody just give me, an idea? Because
Yes.
I'm out of ideas. There's so many days I remember and just being completely wiped out of ideas. Going,
Yes. Yeah.
I just need something in front of me.
Yeah. I'll absolutely share those with you.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And so, and another thing you had said that you wanted to talk about was a citizen science projects. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little
So
about that?
yeah. So citizen science projects, especially for like the older kids as well. This is like a great thing to get involved in, and you can do that as a family as well.
Hmm.
Um, but they're basically ways to like become actual scientists where you're
Hmm.
gathering research and collecting data
Oh,
to help
wow.
actual scientists.
Hmm.
And there's so many to choose from. And again, I can share the websites as well.
Yeah,
There's
that'd be
something called
great.
SciStarter and then citizenscience.gov.
Hmm.
So I wrote those down. And those SciStarter I really liked because of the way it's set up. It's very easy to navigate, and you can pick like the topic that you're most interested in. If you're interested in getting outdoors, or you're interested in animals, or you're interested in space, it'll narrow it down for you and show you the types of projects that are out there, and focused in your area as well. You can type in your location, and it'll give things that you can do from home.
That's neat.
Yeah.
So what have you done any in the past, and what have they been that you've been involved with?
I haven't, well, actually, no, we've done one where we were documenting like certain animals that we would see in our yard. That's the only one that we've done. And iNaturalist is one of the apps that you can use to upload and report your findings.
Okay.
So like for example, like if you're doing, I know they have like a bird watching one. So if you're doing the bird watching, you would go and you would, take note as to what birds you have in the area. You can snap a picture if you're able to get a picture, and upload that. We had seen a bobcat, so we had uploaded that there was one in the area, and uploaded that to the site to show like the date, the time when we saw it, uploaded the photo. But yeah, so there's all kinds of things. So we've done the ones with the animals. But they have a wide variety of stuff, and they even have a few like books that you compare to. I know, I'm trying to think of the one. It was about bats. I forget the title of it, but I can share with you some of those books. But they have like the citizen science ones, like the books that go along with the activity as well. There's one about the water, like finding the little macroinvertebrates. So like, they're basically like insects that live in the water, but then they grow to be adults. They come out of the water, like a dragonfly would be one. So like the baby dragonfly lives in the water. And then as it becomes an adult, it comes out and then it flies around and it's no longer in the water. But those macroinvertebrates are a sign of how clean the water is. So finding those in your waterways is a sign that you have like very healthy water. So that's another citizen science project, like looking for those macroinvertebrates and looking under the rocks for them. So there's a lot out there.
Yeah, that's really neat. Because then eventually that data will be published somewhere, and your kids know they're contributing to something more than just a lesson, that they're helping inform other people, and they're part of something bigger that's something we all want. And how neat that, we finished science this year, but no, we contributed to a study, and let's, I can't wait to see what everybody else observed, or hear about that, and and how what we did made an impact.
Yeah. And then depending on where you live too, I know like there was like a big thing about like, all the cicadas that are coming out. And I know there's going to be another brood that comes out, but in other locations across the US. And that was something too. They have a specific app that you can record like when you see them emerge. And then it tracks them. It like tracks like where they're emerging, when are they, and it keeps track of their populations. So that's another fun one to get involved in.
Yeah. It sounds like there's quite a bit of different opportunities.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. So is there anything else that we missed? I think we kind of covered everything that was on our list. If you are watching and you have any questions, you're like, okay, how do we do this? Definitely put those in the feed. We're broadcasting live to Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. So we would love to know what you think too. I just know that science has made, incorporating science has made such a difference in my kids' lives, and just how they observe the world and live in it. So since you've been homeschooling now for about 4 years, right?
Yeah.
So how have you seen your kids' idea of science change by going this, taking this route versus a traditional route?
So I find them to be very like inquisitive, and I find that a lot of the skills that they're learning with science also like carry over into other aspects of their life
That's
as
good
well.
to know. Yeah.
So like no matter what the subject is, they're applying some of those same skills, like the way that they're thinking and the way that they're asking the questions, and just even being able to like communicate their results, being able to do that like across the field. Like I find that like that's like the biggest thing that I'm seeing it play out in other aspects of their life as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And how freeing for you to
Yeah.
to be able to teach, with such confidence this way. Because I like when we started the conversation, I was talking about, how just apprehensive a lot of parents feel with saying, "Oh, but I didn't check all those boxes off. I didn't get that book opened." Um, but but look down long run is where, I really want to take it, is because now all my kids are adults. And do we want our kids to be box checkers and that, or do you want them to ask why? Because there's going to be a lot of things coming up in your children's lives that you really want them to ask why about
Yes.
before they just do it, especially as they become teenagers and adults.
Yes.
And so, holding on to fear that, oh, I just don't know about this. I don't know if we can approach education this way. It just doesn't. Yeah. Really think about the long run ramifications of just having your kids obey you and follow you versus asking you a lot of questions, asking why, understanding what they're doing and why they're doing it. This whole scientific mindset will lead them into wiser decisions all around, just like Tina was talking about with seeing her kids and how that goes into other subjects. And so, do you find that, like, even if you're reading like literature that has nothing to do with science, that your kids are asking different things about characters, and how does that play out with even their decision making in life, not just in school subjects?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. They're asking questions about the book and like, why did this character do that? And like,
Mhm.
trying to find the reasoning behind things. And so, yes, I see it playing out like across the board. Even to the point where like even within relationships that they have with other kids,
Oh,
and with other
yes.
people, like, trying to understand, like this is the part that always like impresses me. I mean, I wasn't like that when I was their age. Like I didn't think like that. But they will like try to like understand, like, maybe, they did this because they were having a hard day, and like trying to come up
Oh,
with other
yes.
like just different ways of thinking about something versus just
Hmm.
like this person was, mean or not nice, or, and I'm
Right.
just like seeing that aspect of things as well.
Hmm.
Has been a
That's
real,
interesting.
yeah, it's like a real pleasure. And they're just like, again, like questioning like
Hmm.
certain behaviors, like, why did that happen? Or why did they do that? And
Right. Yeah,
not
they're
just
creating.
jumping, yeah,
Yeah.
not jumping to conclusions.
Right. Yes, they're creating alternative hypotheses versus just all right, all out. Just that's the this is the if, or this is the cause and this is the effect.
Yes.
But they're seeing that there's lots of causes and lots of different effects that come from certain causes. And yeah,
Yes.
that's a huge lesson to learn in life. And it's not something we can teach in a lesson.
Yeah.
It's definitely a mindset change, which we were talking about at the very beginning. And I think it's important that, we started this conversation talking about parents making that mindset change and being the example. And so it really has to start with that, doesn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know you offer parents some support, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit about Little Monsters Universe and what you do there and how that might be helpful for some of our community.
Yeah, so I have a social media page as well that offers different ideas, that, if you just want to pop on and look and try to get some stuff for free. And I have some freebies as well, some free sample lessons. But I offer actual lessons that you could buy. But I think the thing that I like most about what I do, and what I really feel like sets me apart, is that I offer custom units.
Mm-hmm.
So I love being able to like work directly with the parent.
Hmm.
And sometimes even the kid, if they want the kid to join in on the conversation, so I can hear
Yeah.
what interests them.
Right. Those interests are so important.
Yes. So I really love that, like talking to the parent and the child, like learning about what they are really interested in, and then kind of tailoring stuff to them. So someone that may like not feel that comfortable with science or the conversation about science, needing that extra help and guidance is something that I can provide, but also allowing them to kind of guide the topic. Like, what are they interested in? And like, for example, I had worked with someone their child was like obsessed with mermaids.
Wow.
And they were like, how can we incorporate science to this? But it was fun. It got me like, having to think outside of the box, and like, how can I, relate science to mermaids, and so I helped them to come up with activities and lessons where they were exploring sound underwater and above water. And so like that, because like then we talked about the mermaids going underwater, and how are they going to hear underwater? How do they hear above water? And so that was like really fun. I enjoy, I like those challenges. How can we incorporate the science into, whatever the topic might be?
Right. Yeah.
So
that's awesome. Yeah. And we've had so many broadcasts talking about interest-led education, and just how kids, their whole, their energy level, there's just so many things involved in that you really want to dive into. And how great to have somebody like Tina who's willing to say, yeah, let's incorporate science in that too, and here's how you do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
and I love that the most, like more than like creating the lessons. And I try to create lessons that, you can kind of be flexible with and tailor to your needs and stuff.
Right.
But again, like, whatever the topic is, like I'm always open to it.
Awesome. And so your website is littlemonstersuniverse.com. And then how can people find you on, you said Instagram is where you mostly are?
Yep. Little Monsters Universe.
Little Monsters
I
Universe.
am on Facebook and TikTok as well. I hardly ever use TikTok, to be honest. But,
most homeschoolers are on Facebook in general. I think the younger ones more so on Instagram, which
so Facebook and Instagram I'm on like the most. That's the ones I keep up with more regularly.
Awesome. So. Yeah. And so definitely check out her website. And we'll include that link as well in the show notes, as well as the Instagram account, so you can pop to those as well. But this has been such an enjoyable conversation, Tina. I have loved hearing your ideas and helping us to think more so outside of just general science education. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you. So, I enjoyed this. I love talking science.
Yes. well, we appreciate you talking science, because we don't talk about that much on the show, and I love it. It's not a wonder why my kids like science, being a physicist myself. So everything's an experiment in my life, and that turns out kind of different than a lot of things, but you can't say I didn't try it. So, but that's awesome. And I just, I look forward to hearing how this grows. I know you started Little Monsters Universe about a year ago, you said. Yeah. So, so we'll definitely be checking back in with you again. And, but I'm excited that you have a resource out there for homeschoolers. And
and again, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you all for joining us. I know we've had a lot of viewers on, and you've been quiet, but I hope you had a good lunch. This is a good lunch break. Why not add to your lunch break a mind shift? You can find more episodes of Empowering Homeschool Conversations either on YouTube or on our podcast, Empowering Homeschool Conversations, that is produced by Life Audio, or on any other podcasting network that you might listen to your podcast from. And Tina will share some more notes with me, links and stuff, and I'll make sure to get those in the show notes so that you can directly access those. And make sure you visit her website at littlemonstersuniverse.com. And we just appreciate everything that you shared with us today, Tina. It's been, it's just been a delightful conversation. Yeah. So next week, we are going to talk about reading resilience, empowering parents with 4 strategies to support struggling readers. So if you got a struggling reader, knows somebody who has a struggling reader, definitely join us back next week. Same time, same places. We'll be here, but 12:30 Central on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, yeah, you name it, we're there. So, but join us for that conversation. Dr. Levy is going to share with us some insight on reading and just some things that you can do as a parent to really help your struggling reader. So, thank you all for joining us. Thank you again, Tina. Appreciate you sharing your time, and God bless you all. And we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool. Go to spedhomeschool.com to get resources and support for teaching your unique